Hello and welcome to the Ivy League Sisters podcast, where you're invited into the world of high-achieving women who earned that coveted Ivy League degree and now are here to get real and honest about the pressures and expectations that come with claiming this achievement. I'm Lauren Baluchian, and I'm the founder of Ivy League Sisters, a mentorship community where intellectually curious and slightly rebellious women band together to support each other through the personal and professional seasons of life. In this podcast, we peel back the layers of perfection to reveal the authentic, often messy, and always inspiring stories of women who have been where you are. So whether you're an Ivy League graduate, a high achiever in any field, or simply someone striving to live a more authentic life, the Ivy League Sisters podcast is a place where you can realize you're not alone. And if you're new here, like and follow this podcast so you don't miss out on the latest episodes. I hope you enjoy the conversations.
So first and foremost, thank you for making the time, for taking the time out. The whole purpose of Spotlights, well, there's several purposes, but one of the most important things is that it's a way for other women in this community to get to know somebody on a more intimate level. I mean, it's probably rare that you would have the chance to talk to somebody in the community for 45 minutes or 50 minutes. So there's that, but it's also an opportunity to talk about the things that we really talk about in Ivy League Sisters. And it's a chance to just be really real. And, and as I've said before in our prior communications, like if there's anything that we start talking about and you're like, oh, I think I would like to edit that out, you can always raise your hand and that, because this is published. So with that, I do want to get started, and I want to talk about, so you have such an interesting background and like an interesting job now. And so first I want to like kind of level set. Can you tell the audience like where you are, what you do for a living, like what stage of life you're in? Like you don't have to give your age unless you want to, but like kind of what age-ish you are, like just like level set. Like if I were to point a Google pin and say, I am here, where is that?
I'm okay with my age. I'm 40 years old. And I made a really big change 2 years ago. I was living in Italy already, but I was working remotely for Dartmouth College. And I decided, you know what? I've been working remotely for 5 years. I've been living in Italy for 5 years. And I haven't been focused here. I wake up every morning thinking about New Hampshire. And my Italian isn't as good as I want it to be. And there are all these things that when I moved here and I thought I'd only be here 2 years, I wanted to do, and I haven't done them yet. And so as much as I love my job, and I loved my job, I loved my colleagues, I loved the work I was doing, I think I was really good at it. And I just knew like I need to take this time because I'm in Italy. And where exactly am I? I'm on Lake Como. Right now I'm in Bellagio, which is not the Bellagio in Las Vegas. It's the lake is shaped like an upside down Y, and the mountains jut right out into the lake. And so Bellagio juts right out into the center of the lake. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I want to take you outside and show you.
I would like to go outside and see. Yes.
Yeah. But so actually this is what I do at work every day. I'm like, oh, the lake is an upside down Y, and Bellagio splits it into its two legs, because I'm a tour guide for people who are coming to Bellagio for the day, and they want to get on a bicycle and they want to move a little bit away from that city center, which is beautiful and historic, and they want to get into nature, and they want to see Lake Como for all of its natural wonder, because it's got all this luxury and all this history, but it's also just such a spectacular place for natural wonder. The lake was formed by glaciers, and you just look around and the mountains go 2,500 meters up on either side. And okay, so what's that in feet? I have to be good at meters and feet. So that's more than 5,000 feet. It's like almost as high as Mount Washington on either side, but it goes from lake level, which is just 200 meters above sea level, to 2,500.
wow.
So you get to see 2,300 meters of elevation gain, like boom, right there in front of you. And that's what makes it so spectacular. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so you're in this incredibly spectacular area. I didn't realize that you had moved to Italy, actually, I guess 7 years ago, 5 or 7 years ago. Did I get the math?
6.5 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
6.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Take me back a little bit further. So
Okay.
where did you grow up in the US, like geographically?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a Stamford, Connecticut kid. Both my parents commuted into New York City. I went to public school. And I remember as a little kid waiting by the stairs because the front door was right at the bottom of the stairs. And I would sit on the bottom stair and look out the window and wait for my mom and dad to come home from the train station on their long New York City days. In the winter, it was always sad because they'd come home and it was so dark.
Yeah, they come home in the winter. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I was a public school kid, went to Dartmouth.
And what did you study?
And ooh, I like the way you ask that question. I can't give my normal answer. When people ask me, what'd you major in? I say rowing.
Excellent. Well done.
I was an econ dropout and I ended up being an art history major. I took art history one my sophomore year and I got more attention in that big 200-person class from the professor than I did in all 5 of the econ classes that I'd taken thus far. And I was like, this is why I come to a small liberal arts school, because I want to interact with the professors and actually really like learn from like talking with them and getting feedback from them. And I got that in, who would have thought, art history one with 250 people in the room. Yeah. Yep. And so like I totally shifted gears and I loved my professors so much. And there were only like 12 majors in my class. So the professors all knew every single one of us. And obviously I haven't stayed in art history, but I'm amazed by my classmates who have. They're like, I don't know, like curators and like art traders and all kinds of stuff. So that was really fun. It felt like its own community for sure.
Okay, so how do you go then? So you're an art history major at Dartmouth. And then walk me a little bit through your career paths because you were working in alumni relations for Dartmouth. So tell me a little bit about that career path, like how you got there.
So my path was filled with a lot of jumps. So art history major, which was like probably hurt my dad's soul to see me major in something so impractical. So of course he steered me and he said, well, Alex, when you finish school, what do you want to do? And I think that like inside of me, my heart was saying like, go coach rowing, because I started rowing at Dartmouth and I had developed quite well, I would say, over the 4 years. And so I was really immersed in it, really feeling confident in it, and probably wanted to head in that direction. But Dad was like, oh, you should just go get your MBA. If you get your MBA, then no one can ever take it away from you, and you've got it, and you can just continue on in life. Alex Stein MBA. So I am Alex Stein MBA, though this is the first time that I have ever said that.
I did not know that. I did not know that you had an MBA.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay.
Connecticut kid. I went to University of Connecticut. They won 2 national championships while I was there. One on the women's side, one on the men's side. And I did tutor a woman on the basketball team, and like her discipline on the court came out in the way that she approached her work too. That was really cool. So sports always is always going to come back. That's like a theme in my life, right? So you can hear me like bring it in and weave it into every aspect of what I'm telling you. So go and get my MBA and end up in a GE Capital risk management leadership program. So like, yes, GE leadership program, I am on the path. And right.
Okay, so hang on, just give me a sense. How old were you when you entered the GE DGE leadership program?
June 2008, I entered the leadership program. I'm 23 years old, and I am supposed to be underwriting new loans in June 2008.
Right.
And
Yeah.
on my first day, they're like, so we think we're going to put you in the workout group. And I'm like, yeah, I know how to work out. There it comes again. So I was working on defaulted loans, and I was restructuring them. And I'm 23 years old, and I'm the head of the bank group on like a $25 million loan. And I'm monitoring our collateral and reporting out to the bank group. And I had like such amazing teachers around me, but I was just like, I can't believe that they're like letting this happen, that I'm allowed to be in charge of this, and I'm the voice. And we liquidated companies. That was like, you just think about what you're doing to economies when you do that. And but then like to see all of the angles of it, it was so interesting. I learned a lot, but I also always felt like I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And everyone thinks that I'm doing so well. And that was so confusing to me. And it didn't sit well with me. And it made me wonder.
Okay, so I think that that's such a feeling that so many people either have had or can identify with. It's a touch of imposter syndrome, but it's also this sense of like everybody around me seems to be giving me positive feedback, right? Okay,
Mhm.
so you're working out, you're restructuring, you're running a department. How do you what's
No.
your next career move? Like what do you do next?
So,
Question. I was like, were you happy in the job, and like and how in tune with your own happiness were you at that time?
there were times at GE that I was really happy. Like I worked when I was in the workout group, because I was in this rotational program. So I did my first year in workout, I did another rotation, and then I landed in a full-time job for a couple of years. Um, and there were times when I was happy, but then there were also like these times where I'm like, I don't really understand like uh, this feeling that I have, and it's really confusing that like that. Well, for me, the whole business model for me at GE Capital was kind of confusing and didn't add up. I was like, we have a higher cost of funds. We are harder to work with because we're constantly protecting the GE reputation, and we move slower than anyone.
Right.
And then we also have a lower risk tolerance. And so where do we find business in this model? And I was constantly confused whenever I was on sort of the front lines of things. Um and so was I happy? At times I was learning a lot, at times I felt confident, and at times I just felt confused. And so a couple of things happened. One thing that happened was I when I wasn't happy, I was really immersing myself in other things outside of work. And one of those things was running. And then the other was that I remained involved in rowing. And so I got really involved in a local rowing club, and I was competing with their masters group and like their young professionals group. And I was also volunteering coaching for a local university, for Fairfield University. And that was really fun for me. And then was going out with a Paralympic athlete, a guy who had been named to the US Paralympic team. When he wasn't with the team, he would train with us. And so I would go out and I was the coxswain for the boat. And he came to me after his world championships in 2009, and he goes, Alex, I think you should try out. You were like, you could compete with the guy who we raced with at Worlds this year. And I said, okay, put me in touch with the coach. And I tried out in 2010. And the coach turned to me. I didn't tell anyone at GE I was trying out. I just took a week of vacation and I went and tried out, and I like never thought I would get it. And so on a Sunday, after a week of like really intense racing, the coach comes to me and she says, Alex, I really want you to be the coxswain, but you're the only one in the boat that has a job. And I need to, like, I want to know if you can do this and you can commit to the training schedule. And I just accepted a full-time position out of the leadership training program with GE. And it was a Sunday afternoon and I couldn't call anyone. And she says, if you can't take it, I want to tell the other coxswain she got it and have her not know that we had this discussion at all. And I was trying out in May, and usually the championships are like in August or September, but it was a Southern Hemisphere championship year. So it was a November championship year, which meant that I would have had to commit to her to be able to do the training, which she didn't know the training schedule at the time, and say that I could do that through November without talking to anyone at GE. And I turned to her and I said, I don't want to slow the boat down. I think you should choose the other girl. And so she told the other girl she got it. And the other girl raced in the world championships that year. And I went back to work.
Oh my gosh.
For the whole year, I thought to myself, like, oh my God, what did I do? How could I have made that decision? And so it prepared me. Because luckily, the coach let me try out again the next year. And I got my shit together and actually realized that I could possibly get it. And I talked to people in advance and sort of said, okay, I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to go try out. How would it play out if I were to get it? And I did my homework. What a hard way to learn the lesson, to do your homework. And I got it. And I competed in 2011 with the Paralympic team. And then somebody came to visit me. Oh, no. Yeah. Yes, I competed in 2011 with the team. And before we competed, somebody came to visit me to ask me for a gift to Dartmouth for my 5th reunion. Because my 5th reunion would have been that year, 2011. And I feel like I'm wandering all over the place. He was asking me for a donation to Dartmouth, and I just turned to him and I said, is this your job? You talk to people about sports all day? Like, when are you going to hire me to do this?
I get like in my head, I'm thinking the wheels in Alex's head are going like, how do I get that gig? But
okay, so I just asked him, I'm like, when are you going to hire me?
I have this other question. Okay. So hang on. I'm going to stop you for 1 second. So what I'm hearing you say is in 2010, I tried out. I didn't tell anybody at GE, was completely unprepared for like the thought that I might get it. Then I do get it. I don't have the opportunity to have a conversation with anybody in my employer about what this might look like if I'm trying to train and work. So you pass the opportunity to the other person. And then is it a feeling of regret or that you sit with for the next 5 months?
Yeah, for a year.
Okay. So you're sitting with that in your belly as you're working at GE. Then the opportunity comes up again, and you have this I guess you had some proactive conversations with people at GE, like, I'm going to go try out for this. This is what it could look like. Is that like, so how did those conversations go?
It was great. I talked to human resources and asked them, like, how should I approach this? And if they thought that it could work. And they said, you've got to talk to your reporting manager first. And like with their approval, there are different ways that we could approach this and figure out a pathway to making it.
You're how old when you had that conversation? So now that's 2010-ish?
26. Yeah.
So you're 26 years old. So I just want to call out that you're 26 years old. Most 26-year-olds do not have I don't know, the communications, the whatever, to go to HR and be like, look, hey, I want to try out for this thing and it could be really difficult in my work schedule. How do we work this out? That
Yeah.
alone,
Yeah.
and I don't, whether you're 26, 36, 46, 56, that's a really important step that you took. That I
Yeah.
still think a lot of people who are listening to this are going to go, where in my life could I have asked just for someone to meet me halfway? Could I have asked, how do I make this work for something I want to do? Okay, so I just want to name that and call that out. Like that's actually, it takes a lot of gumption and a lot of self-confidence to go to HR and raise the question at 26 years old, let alone.
I mean, what it takes is like a lot of regret, I think, right? Like that's what it was, is I had to make the hard call in the moment. And so I wasn't going to let that happen again. I wasn't going to let that opportunity slip by me again. And it forced the conversation of how do I make this happen? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes those feelings of regrets can motivate us to do things that we wouldn't, to do hard things. Okay.
Yeah.
So you go to HR, you have this conversation. Somehow you work it out with your manager. You get the team.
I think it was a leave of absence. I took a 3-month leave of absence or something.
Okay, so you find a way to make it work. Like, great, your employer values what you do. You really want to go do this thing. You guys find a way to make it work. And in the interim, somebody comes to you and asks for a gift. And so you're asking this guy, hey, like, is this your actual job?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we left off. So tell me about that. So you're 5 years out, somebody comes and asks you for a gift.
And I'm like, yeah, I'll make the gift. GE Capital will double it. And like, right, I have a matching program. But hold on a second. Is this your job? When are you going to hire me to do this? And I've never like had anything like that come out of my mouth before. But this guy he ended up being my boss for 4 years. Like he was so fun. And like it was just such a match. Like Dartmouth sports transformed my life, gave me so much confidence. So much of what I'm so passionate about is right there. And boy, I can talk to any Dartmouth alum about their athletic experience. Like, send me out, boss and coach. So I'm preparing to go on this leave of absence. And this guy, he got really freaked out because he was the first athletic fundraiser. He was just like sort of proving himself in the Dartmouth model. And he was like, oh, well, I don't know if we're going to be growing the team, but maybe if we do, then I'll call you in 2 years. And I really caught him off guard, but he called me back as I'm heading off to like the World Championships for 2011. And he's like, hey, I did really good this year. We're going to grow the team. You should apply. And so I remember reading the job description with my coach at the time. And that was really cool because she knows my skill set from the coxing perspective. And was a really great confidant. And she's, you know how when we say like women read the job description and they're like, well, maybe kind of I can do that. She was just this voice of confidence for me as I'm reading the job description. She's like, yep, you got that. Yep. You can do that. So it was like, I wonder if I had read the job description alone, if my experience would have been different. But I was just like going for it. Like Karen gave me the power. It was so cool. And so then the other thing that was such a tell was I'm with my dad after the World Championships and I'm like, oh shit, Dad, I got to write that cover letter. I haven't sent it in yet. And I sit down in a hotel in Zagreb, Croatia, and I write it in 15 minutes. And my dad has always been my editor. He reads it, doesn't change a thing, and I send it off. Like, I have written so many cover letters where I suffer.
So you left off and you said, you wrote this cover letter in a hotel, in 15 minutes in Croatia. Your dad, who's been your editor for your whole life, looks at it and is like, I don't know how many changes. And you send the thing off.
Yeah.
So like the universe is giving green lights, I feel like, is what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just want to call out too that like there's something else that you said earlier that's so important. And that is that you when you were reading the job description, you're reading it in the company of somebody who really believed in you. Like
Yeah.
you don't recognize, like you have naturally a lot of confidence. I can see that in you, but whether you do or you don't, I think that's such an interesting moment. Like, you're thinking, do I take this next step? And as you're contemplating it, you're in the confidence, and in the company of someone who really believes in you. It's just like if you needed an extra boost, like you've got your built-in rocket booster right there with you.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So you send the cover letter in, this guy has called you. He's like, hey, I did really well. I'm going to grow the team. You send your cover letter in, right? Your coach is like, oh yeah, you got this. You're checking all the boxes. So you send it in. Obviously you get the job.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then do you move back to Hanover? Like, what was it like leaving GE?
Well,
what was
that? Hard. Like, think about it. I was a leadership training program kid. I love my colleagues, and I was part of this great team, and it's so hard to jump ship. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, you're jumping ship right as like you're starting to like get bonuses and start to feel the economic benefit. And I was deciding to take a 50% pay cut by going from finance to a nonprofit. And so it was really good that the universe had been giving me all those green lights you talked about, because I think I needed all those green lights. And I also needed that experience of missing out on something really big in order to be ready to take such a big jump, moving away from the path I'm supposed to be on and from the money that I'm starting to really feel, and take that jump towards something that just you can feel the alignment, and you can tell like the money doesn't matter as much because there's something else there that matters a lot more. So it was hard to say goodbye to GE. My biggest advocate said, yes, Alex, yes, you're getting out before you're stuck. They said to me, once you have a mortgage and kids and the lifestyle that this paycheck affords, gets way harder to do the kind of jump that you're doing right now. So it was kind of like, you're only 26. Good. This is when you do this. And yeah.
I have a question. The people who told you that, so it takes a lot of bravery, first of all, for those people to say something like that. I'm just curious, and I don't know that it matters, but I am curious. The people who said that to you, were they male or female?
Male.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Yeah, I think that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think having come also from finance, I watched a lot of guys who would trudge into the office every day in a beautiful suit and, in a great car and all that. And I always wondered, are you here because you love it? Or are you here because you're stuck? And so I think it's really interesting that you had male colleagues who actually had the courage to verbalize that. So anyway, I just call that out. Okay. So you have colleagues who, say, hey, what you're doing is brave, and now is the time to do it before you have all the trappings of, all the responsibilities that this lifestyle can afford.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you actually move to Dartmouth, or?
I moved to Hanover.
Okay. You moved to Hanover.
Ooh, worst time. I moved to Hanover, or I moved to Norwich as a Vermonter for a little while. And I started in the Dartmouth College Fund, which is the annual fund, but focused on fundraising for the athletic department. That was my role. Okay. So it was kind of like sit in development, but also working hand in hand with coaches. And I'm identifying the alumni who care the most about the sport. And I'm trying to build up boards that are then representatives of the full alumni body, and working to engage alumni around sport, around the current athletes, and eventually to increase their giving to the sport. So athletic fundraiser. And what really benefited me in that was my own transformative experience, but also like my passion for history and like legacy. So my approach was always like, I want to know what era of the team you were from, and who was the coach you had, and who were the influential people. And then you start thinking about how the different eras link, because like the 79s don't actually know the 85s, but the 85s are so influenced by the 79s. So if you know the 79s, then you've got the 85s kind of thing. So
interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun.
So how do you, okay, so you're doing this job and you're liking it conceivably, like, right? Is it living up to everything you had hoped for?
Oh yeah, it was, I mean, it was a challenge. I didn't know how to ask for money, so I had to learn about philanthropy, and I had to develop sort of my own core of like, what is understanding, like, I mean, the way that I would literally describe it when I first started was, I walk in and I ask someone for money and I give them nothing in return. And they give me a proverbial check. They're not actually handing me a check in the moment, but they're giving me a check, and I'm giving them nothing back. And at the end of the conversation, they're thanking me. And I don't understand this at all, but it's so powerful. People are so passionate about it. And philanthropy really is like when you're doing it because it makes you feel good, to see what you're investing in happen, like, wow.
Yeah, it's philanthropy so, at its core to me is a purchase. I'm voting for a future. That's what I think, you know, when someone gives charitably, they're buying an interest in the future looking a certain way, how, you know, whatever it is that they believe in.
Yeah.
So you're in Hanover, you're rocking the job. Now help me understand how you like raise your hand. You're like, I'm going to move to Italy and do the job.
Yeah.
Walk me through that. How'd you do that?
So yeah, my partner decided, he applied to grad school. He ended up getting in here in Italy. And essentially, I'd been working in New York for this fabulous boss who I loved. And as soon as he started applying to grad schools, I told her, I was like, I just want you to know that I have this going on in my life, and it could end up being a consideration. And I want to keep you in the know, because I want to keep working with you, and I want to like sort of figure that out. And then when we chose Italy, it was like Colorado and I don't know, all these other places stateside that would have been easy because my department was regionally based at the time that I was doing this. We chose Italy, and she's like, oh, Alex, this could be a little hard. Could do. So I give her credit. And I give like human resources also did so much to figure this out, because there's a lot of challenging stuff about employment internationally, but she tried to make the case that I was so valuable to the New York team that they could fly me in for a month every 6, and I could get my whole job done in New York in the same New York role, in those 2 1-month trips. And she's just so clever, and she knew how ridiculous it was, but she was just trying to say, like, Alex is such a good asset that she could pull this off, like, and we should keep her because of that. And luckily they didn't think that was practical, but there was a global initiative at the time, and they were really focusing on how do we expand our reach to alumni internationally. And so that provided me the platform to stay on with Dartmouth and fundraise from the alumni, living in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So that became my role once I came here. But I did have to come here not knowing if all of the legal stuff would align. And so I did make that call.
A little bit of leap of faith. Yeah.
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 So, okay. So you did that for 4 or 5 years while you were living in Italy.
Yeah.
And And you talked a little bit at the opening of the conversation about like, what prompted you to go, I'm going to leave my job that's safe and or at this point it's probably feeling very safe and secure. You know how to do the job. You're good at it. There's compensation. You've got all the things and you're like, I'm going to go be a bike tour guide.
So I didn't leave with that in mind. I didn't have that lined up before I gave notice.
Oh, interesting. So tell me about that. So you gave
Okay.
notice without having something else necessarily lined up. Is that the case?
Yeah. I
Tell me about
said
that.
I wanna be more locally focused. I want to wake up thinking about Italy. And so I'm going to leave this role to figure something out here.
Hmm.
And I had a really good friend who owned the bike shop, and I had been, I guess, saying to her, when I leave my job, I'm going to come and work for you. But I had kind of forgotten that I'd been saying that all the time. And so when I told her I had left my job, she called bullshit on me, and she's like, okay, are you going to come guide for me? And this was, I gave Dartmouth 3 months notice. Like, I think I told them in December for February final day. And so before February, she had reached out to me and asked me to join her team. And so I ended up having things lined up, but I did decide without having anything lined up, which meant that I really had to do some soul searching in terms of finances and thinking about, okay, I'm not going to have an income for a little while. It definitely leveled my approach. I think, like, you always want to leave on good terms, but I think even more than leaving on good terms, it was I loved my job at Dartmouth so much that when I left, it was like, I'm leaving for now. I'll be back. I want to come back. And I still feel that way. When the time is right, I still feel like I want to go back. But I had to get my confidence around my finances, and which meant looking. Yeah.
Okay, because I want to talk a little bit about that. One of the things, when we talk to women and they're contemplating a career shift or a career change, one of the concerns that always comes up, like we have all the gremlins and the goblins, like, do I have the confidence? Do I have the skills? Do I have the experience? All that stuff. Yeah. But one thing that always comes up, and it's a valid concern, is what does this do? What does this job change mean for me financially? And what I've heard you say in this conversation is, hey, look, I already went through one job change where I took 50% cut in pay.
Yeah.
And I left my job without necessarily having a plan. Although I also want to name, like, you had somehow kind of manifested what you had already said to this person several times. But talk a little bit about that. Like, I'm leaving my job at Dartmouth. Tell me a little bit about, like, how you navigated the financial uncertainty. Tell me about that.
So one of those coaches that I'd worked with when I was fundraising for Dartmouth ended up leaving Dartmouth and becoming a wealth manager. And he and I would scheme all the time for the sailing team. And we were always trying to figure out what the next big gift was and how do we get another sailboat or a new boathouse or whatever. And so we really became strategists together, but he also became like a real confidant to me. I never actually went to him to be my wealth manager, especially because he can't do that for me when I'm in Italy. But I called him and I was like, I need to gut check this with you. When I look at the numbers, I actually feel like maybe this is possible. And he looked at the numbers with me and he really gave me a lot more confidence. He's like, Alex, you're in such a great spot. And I think I've shared with you that I believe that I'm in that position because at 22 years old, a very important person to me encouraged me to max out on my 401k at work every year and to establish a Roth IRA and max out on that every year. Mm-hmm. And I had done that since I was 22 or 23 years old. And I think that changed my life. That practice. It did two things. That money was like never mine to begin with. I just knew it had to go in that direction. And so it never gave me a sense that I had the raw amount that I was actually earning. My spending power was only the money after I made those contributions. And so I lived in a way that some would call below my means, but I think I lived like within my means, and it taught me how to not spend all my money, right?
Yep.
And so having that lower spending pattern trained into me, and then compounding interest is freaking powerful.
Yes, the eighth wonder of the world. So like there's a couple things in it. It truly is. And you know, if you the people who listen to this, like, you know, I have a talk on this that's posted in Ivy League Sisters, but I want to call out a couple things that are really important that you've verbalized without verbalizing. Number one is that you basically said, I had a financial big brother. I had somebody I trusted, who I knew would have my best interest at heart, who I could pick up the phone and say, I need to gut check this. Like, my math looks right, but I want someone else. And I think there's a lot of people who don't necessarily have that financial big brother or big sister. And I think finding that person and having that person on your team, I'm convinced life is a team sport. So you got to figure out who's going to play varsity with you. Life is a team sport. Who's playing varsity?
Yeah.
Everybody's varsity team needs to have a CFO, like, or, you know, just someone that you can go, whether it's a family member or a professional advisor or whatever. So I wanted to call that out. You had somebody on your team who was a financial big brother for you.
Yeah.
Number two, you did something that's really important. Your 22-year-old self was setting your 40-year-old self up for success.
Yeah.
So every time you're 22 and you're 23 and you're 24-year-old self, she was voting for the person who was going to be there in 20 years. Your 22-year-old self was voting for your 40-year-old self to have freedom, options, availability, even if you didn't know what those were going to be. And I think a big part of living our lives now is setting our, whatever age you are, I always make the decision, like, okay, you know, what is my little old lady self? Like, what is she going to really want? Like, how do I set her up for, like, I want my 77-year-old self to look back at my 47-year-old self and be like, oh, thank you, girl. You had me covered.
I play that game, but I play that game tonight when I'm eating ice cream gelato. I think to myself, what does tomorrow me want? I think tomorrow me wants a little gelato, so I probably shouldn't eat all of this now.
But it is, and you also, you name this in your conversation, like, you know, you had at 22, you had developed the habit of living below your means. And we underestimate that as a superpower.
Yeah.
It's a superpower. Like, understanding, and to me, living below your means really means that I know that you know how to discern what makes you happy and what really won't bring happiness, and you spend on the things that make you happy. Because I look at you and you don't look unhappy. Like, there's this great big glow and a smile. Like, you are not living from the outside. It doesn't look like you are living an unhappy life at all. So, I mean, I'm guessing you probably make a fraction of what you made at GE, certainly a fraction of probably what you made at Dartmouth. But it looks from the outside like you have a really rich, fulfilling life. Like, is that fair? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I'm living.
Okay, so you're I want to switch gears a little bit because there's this other thing that you do. There's this other aspect of your life, and it's your quilting. So we've talked about Alex, like, you know, who's an MBA, Alex, who's had plenty of business success, Alex, who, you know, who's, you know, had career success, and who's an athlete. At what point, where along your trajectory did you pick up quilting?
Okay. So I fell in love with quilting in high school when my parents took me to Lancaster County and we were going to like the summer country fairs. And you see the Amish women with their stands, and their quilts are unbelievable. And the
I've only seen it
color,
in books.
yeah, the color, the combinations, the work, the comfort of it, it all resonated so much for me. And I remember it might have been when I was in business school, my mom had gotten me, when she saw this passion, my mom had gotten me this like quick set of like make a quilt. And in business school, I pulled it out. And the first thing you're supposed to do, which is actually now controversial, I now that I'm really a quilter, is some people wash their fabric because
Yes.
you would never want the fabric to bleed once you've turned it into this beautiful quilt product.
Right.
And then you wash it, right? So you wash the fabric before so that you never risk bleeding, which I thought was something you had to do. And all my fabric got knotted up. And I was like, oh my God, I'm paralyzed before I even get going.
And this is your very first quilt.
This is the first quilting attempt I ever made. The fabric was all knotted, and I'm a little bit like obsessive. And so I felt like I had to like unknot all these things instead of now knowing like, oh, I would just go in and cut a bunch of it off and whatever. I felt like I had to unknot it, and that ended up in the box. And so I had a failed attempt. And then a friend of mine from Dartmouth made a quilt for her, also Dartmouth's sister, and for her wedding. And I saw it and I was just like, oh my God, I've got to do this. And so we're going to just go to the quilt shop and we're going to buy fabric. And I don't even know how to use a sewing machine, but I'm going to spend $150 on fabric and we're going to be quilting pen pals. She's in San Francisco. I'm in, I don't know. Oh, it was Connecticut because I was still working for GE when this happened. And I get my mom's sewing machine and I start trying to piece this thing and the machine isn't working. And so what do? I go and I look for my expert to help me, right? And I do all this research to find the right person to like help me with my mom's machine or like teach me or whatever. And I find this guy, and in all these crazy corners of the web, there are these incredible articles and reviews of him, but nowhere is there like one space for his shop. So I go in with this in mind. And he's like, he ended up having to fix my mom's machine. There was legitimately something wrong with my mom's machine, but he also, of course, tried to sell me on a machine. And there was one machine he totally sold me on, but I was not going to pay as much as that machine cost. It's like, I'll use my mom's machine for how much that
right, because we're living below our means, so we're going to use mom's machine.
Right.
But
what I figured out was I asked him, do you have a website? And he got so fired up about it. He's like, you're the fifth person who's asked me that this week, and blah, blah, blah. And this was like 2010. And I'd been building a website for Friends of Rowing as one of my volunteer things that I was like doing, whatever. And I said to him, well, what if I built you a website? I was like, I really like that machine. Would you give me a discount on that machine if I build you the website? And so he thought about it because he'd been getting a lot of questions about the website. And he said, okay, if you build me the website and you monitor it for 2 years, then I'll give you the machine. It's yours. And I swear to you, that's what got me into quilting. This guy setting me up with the right machine and showing me how to use it, and me being so invested in it in that way got me into quilting. And I just love the colors and the fabrics. And wherever I go, I look for fabric shops. So when I was fundraising for Dartmouth, like, you know, you've got like a 9 o'clock, a 12 o'clock, a 3 o'clock, and a 6 o'clock meeting, but there's windows in between. And so I would go and I'd be in North Carolina, and hell yeah, I'm going to find all the shops in North Carolina. There are a lot of them down there. Or like, and so like when I look at my fabrics, I can remember the shops where I got them and the trips that I bought them on. And so there are all these layers of the story, like, right, because the fabric itself tells a story. Right. And then the combinations that you create within the quilt tell a story, and the way that you cut the fabrics and the shapes that you put into it. But then for me, it's also, I remember where I was when I bought that fabric, and And so there's this other layer, and
layer, of history, of your own personal history in every quilt.
Yeah.
Of your own travels and your own memories. And I want to name too that you have your own website for your quilts, which is bunnybearquilts.com. Which I think I was there yesterday. I was like, because I've seen pictures of your quilts and they're so beautiful. Like they're just,
thank you.
Colors are so saturated. Anyway, I think your work is fantastic. And so I wanted to name, like, you know, I think one of the things that's so interesting about everybody in this community, or just people in general, is like there's so many facets to one person's life. I mean, we've been talking for, I don't know, a little bit less than an hour. And I had no idea that you had ever had an MBA. I had no idea that, like, I think I knew that you like rode once. I didn't know. I didn't know you'd been on a world champion team. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many facets, and we're all, and then like, I knew that you quilted, but that's a whole other kind of artistic expression to your life. It's, you know, it feels like it's a big part of your life. I just think that's so great, because I think from the outside, here's what it looks like, Alex, to me. I see this woman who's 40 years old, who's made a handful of kind of unconventional choices, but has like picked people who played varsity, like this really great coach who's reading the job description with you. You got a financial big brother. Like, you got some really good people on your team. You didn't get there by yourself. I mean, yes, you have a lot of gumption and you're super intelligent and hardworking. Like, great. But so does everybody in the Ivy League. Like, that's the one thing that's a handful of things we all have in common. But you've made this series of unconventional choices, and some of them you've stepped into, like leaving Dartmouth without necessarily having a plan at 40 years old. You know, I guess you did it at 38. Like, that's really brave. Like, takes a lot of confidence. But I look at young Alex, like 22-year-old Alex, 23, 25-year-old Alex, is doing things that are investing in her own confidence. So 38-year-old Alex can be like, yeah, I'm going to step out of this. I don't really know what's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. You may not have realized, but I feel like your 20-something self was investing in both your financial wealth, but also your emotional wealth, that confidence to go do something else. And then meanwhile, you know, you have this other thread of artistic expression, which I think is so cool. And I want to name the other thing that I've heard several times in this conversation, and that is like, you are creating options that are not on the menu. So
I love
when
that.
you're at GE, like being a rower and having a job at GE, like that's generally not on the menu. But you go to HR and you're like, hey, I want to put something on the menu of options for me in my life.
Yeah.
And you make it happen. And then, you know, and then also just, you know, going to like the quilt shop, that was not on the menu. Like, hey, I want that machine. It costs X amount of money. Like, I don't have that amount of money because I live below my means, because that's one of my superpowers. So you create something that's not on the menu. Like, hey, I'll do your website. And he comes back. He's like, well, you got to do the website for 2 years and then you can have the machine. You originally asked for a discount. But I think that's so important, because I think that's something that as women, we're not great at, is inventing things that are not on the menu. Because in that scenario, like as I see the menu is the machine at this price. That's what's on the menu. And you go to him and you're like, I want the machine at this price and I'm willing to do this. And then he comes back and he goes, well, how about the machine at this price and you do this? And I just think, you know, the power of asking is so important. Like, you don't realize it, but you're actually a great negotiator, because you ask for things that are not on the menu.
I like that. I like how you tell my story.
I love your story. That's why I was like, I want to talk to everybody in Ivy League Sisters, because I think they're all like such an incredibly interesting group of people. But, you know, when I hear Alex's story, I'm like, how do you go from an art history degree at Dartmouth, like, to being a bike guide in Italy? Like, I want to hear that story, because I know that there's things in your story. I mean, talk about career switches. Like, you went from art history and then you got an MBA and GE finance, and then working in development for Dartmouth, you know, to taking time out and being like, you know what, I want to focus on Italy. I'm in this amazing place and I want to immerse myself in it. I want to be in it. And not only, what's so interesting is like, you felt that and you acted on it. Because there's a lot of times in our lives, I think, that we feel something and we don't necessarily do anything, which I am guilty of. You know, we feel something.
It takes time, though.
It takes time.
And I mean, like with my 2010 World Championship, like trial. Like you learn hard lessons sometimes. And I
Yeah.
think like learning those hard lessons teaches you like don't wait.
Yes.
Or like Lauren was really helpful in me figuring out, okay, no, I can't wait. I should do this. I should make this move. Like once I realized like the finances line up, like where's my heart was the question, right? And this community helped me figure that out too, that like, okay, I do need to do this. It's time.
It's time. Well, I think that's why people come to this community, but I also want to name that. And I love that you called it out when you said, I had regret. And I think regret is an expensive form of tuition, but it teaches us something.
Ooh,
regret is tuition. Regret is absolutely a form of tuition. And so you paid your tuition. And you were like, not only I paid my tuition, but I'm going to learn the lesson, which is because a lot of us pay the tuition, but we still don't learn the lesson. So we end up paying more tuition. So you paid your tuition, you learned your lesson. You're like, I'm going to try something different. And then you go to HR and you're like, I want to try to create something that's not on the menu. And that allows you to go to like, that becomes a part of your story. And so then that becomes a skill. Like, it's so interesting to me. So I could keep this conversation going forever because I think there's so many interesting aspects of your life, but I want to be respectful of your time. But I do, before we go, I want to ask 3 rapid fire questions. And don't overthink them. Don't overthink them. No. Don't overthink them. Don't overthink these. So first question is, what is the biggest thorn on your rose bush right now? Is it people pleasing, imposter syndrome, or perfectionism?
It's hard to pick just one, but I know like people pleasing is my fatal flaw, and it's something I have to overcome. Yeah. And in some respects I have, and in some respects I struggle with it so much. Yeah.
There isn't a person who's listening to this for whom that won't resonate, because people pleasing is also a form of tuition. And sometimes we pay tuition in our professional life, but we don't pay it in our it's very interesting how that plays out.
Yeah.
Next question. What is one lie you still tell yourself?
That I don't belong.
You are not alone. You are not alone in that lie.
Yeah.
And last question. What's one thing that feels kind of edgy in your life right now? Might be a secret that you want to share or not share. I don't know. But what's one thing that feels a little edgy in your life right now?
Trying to think about it. Sort of like it's such a fun thing to think about, like, am I actually edgy? Like,
it doesn't mean that you have to be edgy, but is there something in your life that feels edgy? Something that feels a little raw?
Raw. I think relationships are really tricky, and there are a lot of raw spots right now in my relationships, and I think that's both love but also like business right now. And so like figuring out how to navigate things with like within your own value system, and especially with people that have different values than you, is really, really tricky. And something that I'm struggling with right now for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the great thing is it seems like sometimes when we rub up against someone else, like that's how we figure out what we value and how highly we value it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that conflict, yet another form of tuition, is really valuable. Really valuable.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you for taking the time on behalf of not just myself, but for everybody in the community who will now get to know you so much better. So now there's, over 100 women who know Alex, to the tune of 55 minutes much better.
Yay.
So you can be in a breakout with someone and they'll be like, oh yeah, well, I started quilting 20 years ago or whatever. It'll be so great.
This was such a pleasure. Thank you. You made it so much fun.
Oh, I knew we would have a great time. I knew we would have a great time. So I've, for those who are watching or listening, I've talked to Alex on a handful of times, I think, throughout the past few years, whether it was on a breakout session, or in some other context. And I've always enjoyed our conversation. I hope one day when you actually get back to the US for visiting or for whatever, that we would find a way to meet up, because I think that would be so much fun.
Yeah, the feeling is totally mutual, and I'm really grateful for your time and for all you're doing to lead this group. I'm really, really glad to be a part of it, and it's really making a difference for me in a lot of different ways.
Oh my God. Okay, that makes my day. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that, I'm going to sign off. So it's evening for you, so go have a wonderful evening. Go relax. Have a gelato, do whatever you're going to do today. But I'm going to go start my day.
Thanks.
All right. Take care. We'll see you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you'd like to be in contact with our community, you can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Ivy League Sisters, or visit our website at ivyleaguesisters.com. And if you found this conversation valuable, I invite you to share it with another woman, another friend, another loved one, because it's through our sharing that we inspire one another and deepen our connections. Until next time, remember, you're not alone. We are in this crazy thing called life together.